Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves.
On the 25th of April, 1999, between 10 and 16,000 Falun Gong, or Law Wheel Cultivation believers, clutching the little blue book of Li Hongzing, gathered outside the Chinese Communist Party's headquarters in Beijing. They stayed from dawn until well after sunset for what was the largest public protest in China since the 1989 democracy movement that resulted in the Tiananmen Square Massacre. These were the practitioners of an energy cultivation practice, not entirely unlike Tai Chi, but far more subversive in the eyes of the state, and their protest incensed Chinese authorities. Over the next 7 years, the Chinese Communist Party would see more than 800,000 Falun Gong believers arrested and just over 3,000 killed. For the Chinese authorities, Falun Gong, or Law Wheel Cultivation, was a dangerous devil cult, worthy of persecution, decreed from the very top of the government and party structure. Today, on Occult Confessions, we try and figure out why? My name is Dr. Robert C. Thompson, joined this day by Savannah Barrett, sister of the 84th degree.
Hello.
How's it going, Savannah? You heard about these Falun Gong folks?
When you texted me and said we're going to talk about Falun Gong, and I was like, yep, I definitely know what that is.
Oh, you do?
Nope.
You didn't know.
I was sarcastic.
You were being sarcastic.
She had me fooled.
See, I believed you.
Oh!
I thought you really knew some things.
No.
Shannon, it's just Shannon Landers, our Insta-Quisitor.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Howdy.
It's been a few episodes. Tell us, have you heard of the Falun Gong?
I have not.
Really? So sometimes if you go through Washington, D.C. or sundry other cities, you may come across them. They're often showing graphic photographs of what has happened to their fellow members in China and asking for support.
Really?
Yeah, you've never come across these folks? Sometimes they're staging protests. They'll hold a sign. It could be like 5 or 6 of them together or larger groups. They used to be in D.C. a lot.
No. I mean, I don't think we spend a crazy amount of time in D.C., but
No.
Yeah.
I've
You
never
never
seen
know.
that.
I'm sure some of our listeners have come across the Falun Gong. But I mean, this is the driving question for today's episode. You know, we often in this country go around saying, oh, those people are in a dangerous cult, or that's a dangerous cult. But, you know, these folks, we're going to learn the definition, the words dangerous cult can be used to criminalize people who may not otherwise be doing anything we would consider immoral or criminal.
Yeah, like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right, like Dungeons and Dragons. Exactly, just like that. Let's pledge it out. We, the members
Of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it.
Very nice. All right, let's see this, if you can do this together now. Shannon, I don't know if you were here since we've changed this. We don't do the plugs anymore. We just open up the order of confessors, but we do it by making various sounds.
Oh, so it's no longer just the plug?
No, you can do whatever you want.
Oh, so
Yeah.
we're just... Oh, okay.
Yeah, you want to take the lead or you want Savannah to?
Okay.
Somebody's got to provide support and somebody takes the lead.
Okay.
Which one do you want?
I will support Savannah.
Go ahead, Savannah.
Ring, ring, ring.
Okay. Welcome.
That was very supportive, yes.
You can't see, but I'm doing by I gestured my hand.
Do you feel
The
supported,
welcoming.
Savannah?
Yeah, I do. I feel really supported. I'm just not happy with it. I wanted a lightsaber sound, and it sounded more like a race
okay.
car, and I'm disappointed.
Oh, if your sound.
I'm disappointed in myself. No, not you.
You did a fine
In
job,
myself.
Shannon.
Yes, you did a great
No,
job.
that's not lightsaber either.
This is scintillating. We want to welcome a few new patrons, Sean S. and Sugar Bear. Someone saved my life tonight. Frederick E. and
Wait,
Elias D.
someone saved my life tonight is the name of someone?
No, it's Sugar Bear.
Oh.
It's an Elton John song.
Oh.
Oh, I thought you needed someone to... I thought you were asking for help.
Someone saved my life tonight. All hearts and love from hashtag Smile up there in the Canadas. Also, Whiskers93 gives us a 1010. Would recommend LOL. Not sure what the LOL is about.
Hell yeah.
They think we're funny.
Yeah, LOL. Thanks, Whiskers93. Thanks, Smile, hashtag smile.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, seriously, because Spotify, every day we're getting new folks giving us them reviews, and you don't get to write there, you just get to star us. So we all we can say is thank you, all of you.
Yes, thank you so much.
But here's the thing about that. Because longtime listeners will know I'm very competitive about these things. And I have discovered that we are just about 100 ratings on Spotify away from a popular conspiracy podcast who I consider to be a secret rival of mine. Now, I can't mention this, can't mention names, don't want to get involved in any of that. So I certainly don't want to promote the show. But if friends, listeners, dear Spotify friends, help me catch this freaking show. It's one of those shows that promotes conspiracy theories. It's so annoying. You can help us overtake this son of a gun.
Yes, please help us. Rob has been keeping us held captive.
Yeah, until this happens.
I'm so hungry.
We're living off of Pop-Tarts and Capri Sun.
That's all I feed them is Pop-Tarts. I know how to make nicer stuff, but I just don't feel like it. So give us those Spotify hearts of any number or duration. 5 hearts stars is certainly welcome, but anyhow, help us catch this person. All right, get us out of here.
More sounds? Pew pew pew.
That was elegant, is what that was.
That was great.
All right.
Nailed it.
All right, so we had some fun. Now we got to talk about Falun Gong, which this is going to be some dark stuff. And I want to make just a quick note. We aren't doing many voice parts in this series, and that is in part because some of this very dark material, people die, and often the voice parts, although they're not always, they can often be serious, but usually we have a bit of fun with the voice parts. We're also going to other countries, so it gets more difficult to do voice parts. So anyhow, so if you're missing our voice actors, they won't be gone for long. They'll be back next series, but we just won't be hearing much of that this time around. Falun Gong estimates its membership at 30 million in Beijing and 100 million worldwide.
Wow.
Those are serious guys.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It was founded by former provincial government official Li Hongzing in 1992. So he's just a civil servant. He's just like working at the DMV one day, or MVS, and one day he's like, God.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow, what an upgrade. What a promotion.
What a promotion, yeah. From the motor vehicle services to a profit, yeah. Li had been practicing Qigong, which is a series of exercises designed to cultivate energy. You guys heard of Qigong? People do it in the U.S. Mm-hmm. No, it's a little bit like Tai Chi. It's a different style of thing.
I mean, I'm sure we know some anime bullshit that it's probably based off of. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's Qigong. It's about moving the energy in your body to for your health and that kind of stuff.
Oh,
just like Tai Chi. Yeah. But he'd been doing that for 40 years. Li had. And he'd recently been transferred to work in Jilin's grain bureau when he developed. So it wasn't the DMV. It was it's like the Department of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Still, though, same idea.
Good promotion.
Man at a desk stamping papers.
When does the Lego store employee become a god next?
Well, you let us know.
Okay,
let us
I'll
know.
let you know.
It's up to God.
Dang it.
He became like a Buddha. So not a god. He became like a Buddha.
Oh, okay.
So he developed his own form of Qigong then. So he'd been doing it for a while, and he said, I think I've got my own ideas about this. And his Qigong combined its teachings with Buddhism and Taoism into a system whose popularity then grew through the 90s to attract millions of adherents. So, he just had this revelation. I'm going to do my own system of beliefs and practices. It's sort of like Qigong, but it's going to bring in Buddhism and Taoism. And some listeners who've heard me talk about China before, basically there are 3 fundamental philosophies in China: Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, that have been competing and alternately rising to the fore and being the dominant philosophy in China on and off for like 2,500 years. So pulling together Taoism and Buddhism into one idea, that's going to be pretty appealing. It touches the Chinese soul. So that's in part, I think, why it was so popular. Qigong, very popular, and then bringing in these other ideas. He's just, syncretizing the heck out of this, and it's going well for him. So throughout Falun Gong's history, Li has insisted that the movement is actually not a religion, but rather a cultivation practice, or Xuilian, Zuilian. I'm, of course, terrible with Chinese. And I can get in trouble for pronunciations. Let me tell you, the Chinese language is incredibly difficult. And the tone of your voice when you speak a syllable can change the word.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I do understand how the Chinese language functions, but I do not pretend to be an expert speaker at all. There is no hierarchy aside from the reverence of Li himself. He receives a bit of, they're like, he's the founder, but otherwise there's no priests or anything. No clergy. All members are essentially lay believers. By lay, we mean just regular folks, not monks or priests, or everyone's just a regular believer, because it's not a religion in his mind. I mean, it's also true in China that the boundary between religion and philosophy is super blurry. Confucianism sometimes feels like a religion with ancestor worship involved, and Confucius regarded as a semi-deity, and other times it's just a philosophy.
Yeah.
Depends on who you talk to. And the same believer could hold opinions that sort of push it back and forth between religion and philosophy. So Li's not unique in saying, it's not a religion. And for it to be very religion-y in our eyes as Western people.
I mean, that's my favorite kind of religion.
Yeah. It's one that's
not a religion. So everyone's like an equal.
Yeah.
There's no hierarchy in this.
Nope.
All right. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I mean, you can be better or worse at the techniques, of course, but that doesn't change anything about how you function in the organization necessarily. So let's talk about what they believe. That's always fun. Believers hold that our universe is part of a vast multiverse or megaverse. So far, so good. We've made a similar case on the show. At the edge of the multiverse is a void that destroys all beings who enter it. Isn't this the plot of Doctor Strange?
Stop. I was literally just like, this sounds so much like the Loki TV show.
Oh, okay.
Because the MCU is doing so much multiverse stuff. Doctor Strange sucked, but Loki was good.
I've only seen the bit
at
of
the
Doctor
very
Strange.
end. So like Loki, I'm not gonna get too much into it. But at the very end, like he got to the end of the universe, and there was a monster there that would literally just like eat everything. So like yeah. So it's like kind of the same principle, but he had to get past the monster to get to the dude who wrote the timeline.
This is essentially Falun Gong.
Oh my god!
So,
I have done my research.
Because when you get past the void, there's the realm of the gods.
Whoa!
The gods, the Buddhas, and the Taos, those who have mastered the Tao, reside beyond the void. But the void is destructive, so...
Yeah. That's interesting,
sort of like
because
that.
that's exactly almost what happened, except there was just one dude.
Falun Gong. They owe Li some residuals.
Sure. Yeah, good luck getting that from Disney. But
the megaverse is both outside beyond the limits of our universe and also inside, encapsulated in microverses that exist within the tiniest grains of sand. This is a Dr. Seuss book.
Yeah. That's where the Grinch lived, in a snowflake.
Yes, that's exactly the one I was thinking of. And Horton heard the Grinch in that snowflake. And these microverses contain their own microverses, and on and on and on. So, sitting on this table, there's a little particle of something, that little spot on the table. Inside there is a whole universe.
That's kind of terrifying.
And inside that universe is a whole other universe. This is a Rick and Morty episode.
I was just about to say that too.
I think Stephen Colbert did a voice on that one.
Was it like the slavery with extra steps or something?
Oh, yeah, they were in a battery. They were powering his car. Yeah. So, we exist both in this dimension and we exist in a parallel dimension. So we have parallel selves who are better than us.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Except for Shannon. Her parallel self's not as cool as she is.
Oh, hell yeah. Someone thinks I'm cool.
Your parallel self
Hell
keeps looking over at you and being like, damn.
One day, buddy.
I'll get there. So they're better than us morally. They are more beautiful than us. And they are unconcerned with fame or fortune. So yeah, we got to get over this podcasting game. Be more like our parallel selves. We got to quit asking for patrons. Our parallel selves never ask for patrons.
Started episode. We need to beat this motherfucker.
Yeah, we need more patrons than our parallel self, and to be more famous than them and have more listeners. Oddly, our connection to these bodies is dependent on racial purity. Children born to parents of different ethnicities lose that link. Yeah, a bit of a boo there.
Yeah. Boo.
So, a little bit of racism in our Falun Gong. China is China, so I'm not going to let them off the hook here at all. But the United States has to deal with the multiracial culture, I think, in a way that the Chinese, they still do. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of blend in Chinese ethnicity, but anyhow. Boo, indeed. Water is
I couldn't think. Concur.
What?
That was the word.
I concur.
I said it dumb.
Thine boo has to been concurred. Water is the origin of all matter in life.
Water?
Okay. But it's not water as we know it. It's like spiritual water. It's water, he says, that does not ripple when you throw something into it.
So it is the ground.
I was thinking like that cornstarch. You make that cornstarch stuff that like is goopy when you pick it up, and
It just
you ever do that?
absorbs it in.
Yeah. It's cornstarch, or the ground, sure. We're giving Lee a real hard time here. Earth, well, he was a little
improv
racist.
this morning, so I'm still like ready.
Still on fire here. Earth was created for human beings who are alone in our ability to trace our origins to the highest levels of the universe. So we're derived from the highest level of the universe, bit of hermeticism. By deviating from our cosmic qualities through immoral acts, humans have descended to the earthly plane. Also theosophy.
Wait, could you say that last bit?
So we're descended from the gods, but through immorality across the generations, we've slowly descended down to earth to become what we are.
Oh, interesting.
So we're the lowest.
We are pretty low. We're not the lowest because there's worms and stuff, but yeah. It could get worse. Here, on Earth, the species has suffered a series of cataclysms that arise every time humanity degenerates and needs to start again. Like, for example, the Great Biblical Flood. That's always our go-to cataclysm. It's also a Hindu principle, the flood. not a biblical flood in that case, the Vedic flood. Various other traditions also believe that there was a great flood. So Lee is sort of tapping into that. A planet-wide restart has happened 81 times, sometimes involving complete planetary destruction and then reconstruction. Reconstructive planeting.
Man, so every religion is just like, fuck the dinosaurs, dude. Like, every single one. That sucks. They're really cool.
Well, I mean, they were here. He's not saying they were never here, but...
No, but you know what I mean? Like, they killed them. They're no, you guys are not it.
Had to be reconstructed.
Throws a meteor at them.
The good people of Earth in these instances were moved off to other worlds. So maybe there were people with the dinosaurs and they just got picked up and scooped away. The good ones. The Shannons of the world got scooped up.
Oh, God.
The parallel selves left behind. There is life on every star and planet, says Lee, but we aren't aware of it because it exists on different dimensions. So if you look at Jupiter, there's Jupiterians. We just can't see them. They're invisible.
No, they're on a different plane.
Right, yeah. Well, they're invisible to us.
They're on a different plane. That doesn't mean they're invisible. I'm fighting with you on this
all right,
one.
Fine.
That's D&D logic. It's like when you're on a different plane, you're not invisible. You're just on a different plane.
But you're invisible to me.
No, you're just not there. You're not on the same plane. You're in a different place.
Rob's like, I don't see them, so they're invisible. Savannah's like, they're just not here. That's why you don't see
But
them.
they're somewhere. So these transplanted humans developed advanced interdimensional technology, but were driven by greed and lust to initiate what Lee calls Star Wars.
Oh, hey, I started the episode with trying to make Star Wars noises.
Yeah. So you're on topic.
I'm wearing a Star Wars jacket.
Or conflict between star systems and planets. So maybe George Lucas was tapping into
that was actually his first draft was called that. Yeah. Little known fact.
Star Wars or conflict between star systems and planets. Dun, 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 dun. The space humans have dark designs for earthbound humanity as well, namely assimilating us and replacing us with clones. So that's what our space brethren would like to do to us.
Why? What would the clones do? They would just be...
Yeah, it sounds kind of redundant, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't know why they want to do that. They don't like us.
Damn it.
The universe is made up of the moral principle of Zhen Shan Ren, so Zhen, Shan, Ren, three separate things, and they translate to truth, benevolence, and forbearance.
I've never heard that last word before.
I got you. Li believes that Zhen Sha Ren encompasses and surpasses both Taoism, which focuses on truth, and Buddhism, which focuses on compassion. It's a little bit reductive, I think, of both Taoism and Buddhism, but okay. Since Li's system includes both truth and compassion, or truth and benevolence, he adds forbearance, which he defines sort of like tolerance, into the mix.
Okay.
So he says, because Buddhism just has the compassion and Taoism just has the truth, but I've got the truth and the compassion, and I even added another thing. Clearly, my religion is better.
But it's not a religion.
But it's not a religion, yes.
What does
My
finger up?
philosophy is superior.
That is interesting. But I feel like benevolence and like almost like patience work together.
Yeah, in a Confucian sense, I think you're already covered on with benevolence. Yeah. And I would suggest that the Buddhists have their truths, like they meditate and stuff, and, you know, the Zen stuff and all that would be very truth-oriented, seeking truth. It's not just about compassion. In fact, Buddhism's often accused of being sort of self-centered until you get around to the compassion side. So it's his take on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Illness and pain are a result of karma, which accumulates from immoral acts. Suffering removes the karma, and so being on the receiving end of violence can be a way of cleansing karma. That's important because when we get to these protesters, they are often going to be on the receiving end of some violence. So it's their belief that this is good for them. The rising predominance of Qigong, Falun Gong, and the process of self-cultivation show that the end times are near. So the mere fact that he has become popular shows that we are coming to the end of the world.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Individuals can...
Well, he said that?
He said that, yeah.
When he made it. When did he make it again?
He's pushing us toward it's basically the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Is when it becomes a big thing. So his idea is that he has arrived at the end of time. He's not the first one to say this.
Oh,
you know.
okay. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah. It's an apocalyptic viewpoint.
So I guess I have a question. So they're trying to escape the apocalypse, but don't they kind of embrace bad things happening to them for karma?
Yeah, so that's true. Yeah, but
Okay.
I mean, if you've been real good, I guess if you cleanse it all out, that'll be better. So, you know, if you're just getting beat up on the street by Chinese authorities, that'll be better than whatever would happen to you during the apocalypse.
Okay.
So you want to get good and clean.
So in
you're
the
ready for
grand scheme
apocalypse.
of things,
Yeah.
these like karma things happening to you
You want to cleanse yourself out.
before the
Apocalypse is coming.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be a nicer apocalypse for you. You'll say, what a lovely apocalypse we're having.
It's a little hot, but you know, could be worse.
There are 5 key Falun Gong exercises. Buddha's showing the 1,000 hands. That's the name of the exercise. That's designed to stretch your mind and your body. Falun standing stance, which is for tranquil movement. There's an exercise called penetrating the 2 cosmic extremes. That is for melding the body with the cosmos. There is Falun heavenly circulation, and that is for circulating energy throughout your body. And strengthening supernormal powers is the name of the last one, and that's to get you all supernatural, have supernatural abilities. It's pretty straightforward, that one.
Yes.
Otherwise, the names are a little cryptic, but yeah. These supernatural abilities, by the way, in the last case, aren't verifiable by physical means because they are based in another dimension.
Yeah,
They're
man.
not invisible.
No, they're on a different
They're on
dimension.
a different plane, yeah. Practitioners must also study...
But that's also like, so you cast a spell here and then like a little fireball appears just out of nowhere in the other plane.
Yeah, it's like if we wanted to, you know, I don't know, send Shannon's parallel self some flowers, we could do it. And I'd be like, I did it.
Flower! And then she's sitting there reading a book, and then it's like,
right, on the other plane.
Yeah.
So I'm looking out for my parallel self.
Yeah, well, we are. We're sending her flowers.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's say we did that.
It.
Here, she's welcome. Anyhow, practitioners must also study Falun Dafa, which is the laws of the universe. If a believer masters the craft of cultivation, he or she becomes a god or Buddha. Li himself has achieved a kind of transcendence, and he is able to place the law wheel within the bodies of his followers. The wheel is a left-handed swastika located in the lower abdomen and concretizes the great law of the universe. So if you're like you become a Falun Gong believer, you commit yourself to Falun Gong. Li comes by and he sticks a wheel inside of you, the cultivation wheel, and it's got the little swastika. Don't get hung up on the swastika. That's a Buddhist idea, Buddhist symbol. He's not into fascism.
If it's facing the other way, it means it's like peace and stuff like that. Like it's like a good symbol.
Yeah.
But if you did it the way the Nazis did it, then it's bad.
Yeah. Li's remarkable cultivation energy has also allowed him to form what are called law bodies, which are extensions and duplicates of Li, except they have curly blue hair and saffron robes. And he sends them out to guide and protect and treat his believers across the globe. So the law body just shows up with flowers.
And blue hair.
And blue hair.
That's really cool.
Curly blue hair.
Curly blue hair.
The law bodies are unique to Li. The Buddhas can do them. The Tao masters can do them. Gods can do them. But just those guys. Li has incarnated as himself many times, and he's no longer subject to the laws of reincarnation, says the belief system. So Li is uniquely powerful among all his believers. He's a bit like these other, Buddhas and
so he's like
masters.
The final stage.
For Falun Gong, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's the ultimate.
And he's the only one who's made it that far?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But he can also help you. So if you he's in the U.S., we'll get there, but
he's alive?
He was in the United States.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant like he's literally alive like right now.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But he can, like if his Chinese followers are going through some trials, even though he's not in China, he can send his law bodies to help him out. So that's how the law body principle works in practice. All right, so let's get to the conflict between Falun Gong and the state of China, the Chinese People's Republic of China. In 1996, Li's seminal text, Rotating the Law Wheel, sold over 1 million copies. This alarmed Chinese authorities because they were like, this guy's getting pretty powerful and pretty popular. Falun Gong is taking off, and that gets us nervous. We don't like things taking off that aren't communism. In July, the government banned the sale of 4 Falun Gong publications. In November, the government-recognized Qigong group, so this is a group, like an official group that certifies Qigong practices, and Falun Gong was in the group because they had a Qigong practice, Qigong-esque practice, but they removed Falun Gong from their confederacy. So, all the occult podcasts sometimes get together. That'd be like if the occult podcast got together and they were like, Occult Confessions, you're out of the party. Because you've offended the occult overlords.
Dang it.
Yeah. Well, they didn't do that. It's hypothetical. And in 1998, Li Hongzing emigrated to the U.S., as I said, possibly at the suggestion of party officials. So some communists may have been like, you should probably just go. He took a hint. He left.
I mean, that's a little bit nicer than just, killing him. So.
Yes, considering the alternatives. Yeah, I think he was so powerful that or so popular they didn't want him to become a martyr. So
yeah.
It was,
That's fair.
Have him go. In April of 1999, He Zhu of the Chinese Science Academy published an article in the obscure Science and Technology for Youth magazine. It's so interesting, in which he accused Falun Gong of being a superstitious cult. Now, this is the origin for that huge protest I was talking about at the beginning. This little article in the Science and Technology for Youth magazine. It's like Highlights magazine, but nerdier.
What? Yeah.
So, a small group of followers demanded a retraction. So, a guy who gets this magazine for his kids saw the article and told his friends, of Falun Gong. And then these little group of Falun Gong people were like, you must retract your words spoken against us. And the magazine was like, nuh-uh, I'm not going to do that. This is for the youth. So then they came to the offices of the magazine, the Falun Gong folks, and they stood outside of their offices in Tianjin to protest. That protest, it's like, 8 guys, grew to 6,000 people.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's probably more people than read the magazine.
Right, yeah. Right. You may be right. There's more youths than the magazine even attracts. And on April the 23rd, the local government removed one of the protesters. So the municipal cops come in, take away one protester. So then members of the group complained that they took away a guy. So the police beat them, and then they arrested 10 of them. 2 days later in Beijing, Falun Gong's members arrived to request that the Beijing government, central government, liberate the people that had been arrested in Tianjin and legally recognize Falun Gong and lift their ban on Falun Gong literature. And after that, we had the huge protest of April 1999. So that brings us to April 23. So there you go. Biggest protest in Beijing since Tiananmen Square. It began with that little article.
Wow.
In the Science and Technology for Youth magazine.
That's so interesting.
Isn't it?
Yeah. That's so, did it become a bloodbath? Did they beat the crap out of him?
Oh, yeah. It was a bloody mess. April 25th was the day of the actual protest. And yeah, it was unpleasant. But we don't, I can speak only vaguely about, what's about to follow, what I'm about to talk about. We have to guess. Because even the Tiananmen Square Massacre, we're guessing.
Oh, wow.
How many victims there were. Because the Chinese government doesn't tell the rest of the world the absolute truth. Think about COVID. We don't actually know how many people had COVID in China or how many people died. We can guess.
And I've been seeing stuff online about people being literally locked in their houses for an entire month and stuff, and they literally are taping the door shut so they can't leave and stuff. Jeez. Shit's crazy.
I had a question. I'm just curious. When they were protesting, did they wear anything for the protest specifically? I know sometimes
T-shirts. Sometimes I don't know. I'm not going to say everybody did, but it's
masks
conceivable.
And stuff, because they tell us now that when we go to protest to wear fucking gas mask and shit.
Oh
yeah. I guess I was curious during this whole thing if they were wearing anything
I imagine them just showing up as is. Yeah. That's really enough because it's so unusual to see anybody protesting anything in China.
Mm-hmm.
So. Maybe they had a logo T-shirt. I don't think they weren't all in uniform. They were somebody
to unify themselves. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to Jiang Zemin, who was president of the People's Republic of China from 1993 to 2003. They generally served for 10 years until most recent Chinese leader. Jiang Zemin was deeply agitated by the movement, and during the 1999 protests, he actually asked to be driven around the protests in his limousine and watched them through his tinted windows.
Whoa. So he actually did that?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. The president of China was driving through these 6,000 people. Jiang was one of China's most enthusiastic leaders when it came to pursuing the Communist Party's atheistic policies. Beginning with the communist takeover in 1949, the Communist Party pursued a program of state atheism and actively purged Buddhists, Christians, and Muslim organizations, among others, and then sent the members for what they called re-education, which we talked about in our cult brainwashing episode, but essentially, very violent, difficult concentration camp kind of situation. You probably are not there to die. You're probably there to be re-educated, but nobody's changing your mind about anything.
No.
You're just scared,
beaten,
and then they put you back. Mao Zedong said, "Our God is none other than the masses of the Chinese people." In the chapter on women in the Quotations of Mao Zedong, or as it's known to all Chinese people beginning in grade school, the Little Red Book, which I have a copy of in my office, not out of respect for Mao, but because I teach about China and I bring it in, picked it up when I was in Beijing. Mao labeled religion one of the four authorities, namely political, family, religious, and masculine, that are, quoting Mao, the embodiment of the whole feudal patriarchal ideology and system, and are the four thick ropes binding the Chinese people, particularly the peasants. So these were the negative forces that communism needed to sweep away from the very first days here, and central to communist ideology. I mean, there continues to be a deep reverence for Mao Zedong and his Little Red Book, and reading the Little Red Book in school and that kind of thing. So these ideas, like biblical to communist Chinese. In addition to re-educating Falun Gong members with Marxist materialism and atheism, President Jiang pursued a draconian program of religious control over occupied Tibet. So just as a parallel, I know we're talking about Falun Gong, but I just want you to understand how passionate President Jiang was about annihilating people's religious beliefs. Tibetan Buddhists and Falun Gong believers preoccupied him as a threat that needed to be stamped out. In Tibet, he declared martial law and decreed that Chinese authorities would need to approve future incarnations of any lamas.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I mean, the Chinese will, I've said this before, but when the Dalai Lama dies, the Chinese will name a lama. And then the Tibetans will name a lama in exile.
Man, me and religion have a very interesting relationship, but like, I don't know. I just like
that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. Let people believe what they want.
Shannon agrees.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Don't kill religious leaders like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't murder them, but
no.
It's that when they died, they were supposed to be reincarnated. And there's an elaborate process where the monks selected the reincarnated lama. And there are a variety of lamas. It's not just the Dalai Lama, but the Chinese authorities are just saying, no. We'll know who the next one is. You don't know who the next one is.
Crazy. That is so scary.
Yes. I mean, it's a kind of atheistic theocracy.
It's so strange, too, because like we're dealing with a lot of crazy stuff right now in America based off of religion, but it's like the exact opposite problem. And I can't even picture a government where they don't talk about religion at all, and then they're trying to push for one that like totally doesn't talk about religion in any sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this separation of church and state insofar as for the Chinese, there is no religion. There is no church. So there can't be a separation because they're telling you what to believe.
It's like the exact opposite, because now we're trying to put Christianity back into like literally everything, and then they're trying to literally take care of like get rid of everything. Like that's insane.
So they basically view religion as a threat to
Yes,
power.
Atheism is the state religion, essentially.
Okay.
So, and I view atheism as a religion. It's a belief system for sure. Mm-hmm. So they're imposing atheism in the same way that we view the court system imposing a certain variety of Christianity on the U.S. I don't know if that's a hot take. I think everybody just understands that that's what's happening. You may like it or you may dislike it, but it's pretty much what's happening. In the United States, anyway. And it is what's happening in China, too, and has been what's happening in China. In 1994...
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I just had no idea that they were that against religion. I didn't know what they believed in at all, but I didn't realize that they were like we're going to kill God.
Actively, yeah. Christians, too. Muslims. Yeah, absolutely.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Hundreds were killed in Tibet. Thousands were jailed. In 94, Jiang implemented a policy of grasping with both hands, which is as horrible as it sounds, to instill communist ideals in Tibetans. In other words, he would grasp the Tibetans with both hands. The Dalai Lama called this a program of cultural genocide. Mm-hmm. Not literal genocide, but cultural genocide, stamping out Tibetan belief system. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, people are dying for sure.
Yeah.
The following year, he had the Panchen Lama, Gedhun Choeki Naima, arrested, and in 1996 banned all images of the Dalai Lama in Tibet. These policies were carried out by none other than Hu Jintao, the Chinese Communist Party secretary of Tibet at the time, who became president of China from 2002 to 2013. So think about that. The president in the 90s is replaced by the guy whose job it was to stamp out religion in Tibet. That goes to show you the importance of religious oppression in Tibet to the party's overall goals.
Wow.
He was doing the party's most important work to their mind. When it came time to pick a president, they were like, we want the guy who was in Tibet. And the cultural genocide implemented against the Tibetans speaks back to a similar effort undertaken against Falun Gong, our subject for the day. Tibet and the Tiananmen Square Massacre form the background then for the conflict between the CCP and the Falun Gong, the Communist Party. Falun Gong believers' choice to stage a mass protest, as peaceful and seemingly sedate as it seemed, was actually a very bold act in China. Large public demonstrations were not popular in Beijing because of the government's response to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests, which resulted in hundreds of deaths. That's hundreds of deaths by Chinese estimates. Chinese government estimated that in that encounter, 300 had died. However, the Chinese Red Cross and the Swiss ambassador put the number up above 2,000.
Oh my God.
That's how much of a gap there is in trying to understand exactly what goes on with the Chinese government.
Ugh.
Falun Gong fared no better with its protest a decade later. Rather than prompting a greater freedom for Falun Gong, the April 99 protest incensed the Communist Party and led to a crackdown. A special task force was created on the 10th of June called the 610 Office for June 10. They weren't very creative about names. What should we call this office? Well, what's today? What should we call our child? What's the date? This is little June 3rd.
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
It's summertime. Hey, summer.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah. They confiscated millions of cassettes and videotapes and books about Falun Gong. Active members who refused to renounce their beliefs were sent to prison and also labor re-education camps. Associates were isolated and watched by friends, family, and coworkers. This is the other thing the communist government does. They make you, they put you on notice because your friends and family will turn you in.
Wow.
Because if they don't turn you in, they'll be on the line.
Mm-hmm.
So you live in a police state. Those who continued to maintain their allegiance to Falun Gong were dismissed from their jobs, had their salaries, retirement funds cut. Even hoteliers and others who rented rooms to visiting members of the sect in Beijing were fined or run out of business. If you put them up so they could protest.
Yeah.
Yep. After police arrested 70 people they considered to be leaders of the movement, 30,000 Falun Gong members staged protests across the country. The police issued a warrant for Li Hongzing's arrest, charging him with publishing heretical materials, causing a mass disturbance, and being an agent of the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Yeah, CIA. So I guess in the government's...
They were like, the CIA is trying to put religion back in China.
Yeah, they believe the CIA invented or was abetting Falun Gong.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible, but that really wasn't the intention of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the people protesting kind of sound like badass.
Yeah, they are.
They knew that they were going to get...
They knew...
totally rocked.
Yeah, but they did it anyway. That's admirable.
Yeah,
deeply brave.
Aspect.
Yeah, it's really standing up for what you believe in. The government accused Falun Gong of causing members to become mentally deranged, leading to suicide, murder, or attacks on the government, prompted by mind control, which we've already argued against in this show. In an accusation akin to those made against Christian Scientists, among others, the government said Falun Gong discouraged its members from seeking medical treatment, leading to their deaths. They told a story of a farmer in Henan province who suffered from a heart condition, but threw away his medicines and worshipped Li's picture instead. Suicide was a more public affair and difficult to dispute, although Li was officially against the practice. Self-immolations, hunger strikes, and mass hangings were a feature of Falun Gong protests against government persecution. Most unusual were the charges of murder made by the government against Falun Gong members. Those murders generally were a result of domestic violence, and those charges were, of course, against Falun Gong believers. A good girl who studied hard at school believed her neighbor had insulted her in her dreams, so she broke into his house and stabbed him to death.
Oh my God.
Young man with a Falun Gong addiction stabbed his father 17 times, believing him to be a devil. 36-year-old clerk killed his wife with a kitchen knife when she tried to keep him from his Falun Gong practice. Graduate student in Hebei province believed his parents were demons and, like the others, murdered them with a knife. And a 29-year-old practitioner axed his uncle to death on the belief that the uncle was plotting to kill him. In total, the Chinese blamed Falun Gong for 1,660 deaths. I just want to point out, this is what is being said about Falun Gong.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it is true? Maybe none. Maybe some of these, cases are true. They're pretty isolated incidents. They don't seem to relate to anything else. But it's easy to create a moral panic around this. Mm-hmm. And that's what the government is essentially doing. We see this with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, a government that wants to promote a message, any institution that wants to promote a particular message, can twist events to serve their purpose. Throughout the year 2000, Falun Gong staged a series of protests in Beijing, with groups ranging in size from a couple dozen to a few hundred. They held signs that said, Falun Gong is not an evil cult, pretty much straight and to the point. Also, truth, compassion, tolerance, the main principles of Falun Gong. Mm-hmm. Li encouraged these demonstrations and told his followers that their fight with the state was leading up to an apocalyptic consummation in which his believers would leave, presumably in a kind of rapture, while those who persecuted them would be destroyed by the gods. Reminds us a little bit of the ghost dance, of course, Christian rapture beliefs, but classic millenarian ideology. The following year, small groups of members began self-immolating or dousing themselves in gasoline and setting themselves on fire. The first of these protests involved 5 people and took place on the eve of the Lunar New Year in Tiananmen Square. The Chinese government upheld these suicides as proof that Falun Gong was dangerous, but Li officially opposed all forms of violence and suicide in his teachings. Mm-hmm. Official Falun Gong leaders vanished and were replaced by facilitators and tutors who hid more easily from the authorities in the long Chinese tradition of secret societies. So they sort of became like the White Lotus Society or the Red Lanterns. They moved in the shadows, opposing the establishment government. Again, very badass, Shannon. Brave, right?
Yeah.
Because anyone could turn you in.
Yeah.
So I think there's also an appetite for dissent in China, There always has been. For thousands of years, there's been an appetite for dissent, even though the Chinese have historically been very good at suppressing dissent.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you have so many rules, it's always going to make people want to break them.
Yep. By 2001, roughly 830,000 members of Falun Gong had been arrested in Beijing. Detained members continued to protest with hunger strikes and attempted group suicide. According to a UN report on freedom of religion by 2006, many of China's prisoners of conscience and roughly 2/3 of torture victims were members of Falun Gong. Let me say that again. Roughly 2/3 of the torture victims in China. All the torture victims. Think about the people China tortures. They were Falun Gong members. The methods of torture included beating with sticks and batons, use of electric shock batons, cigarette burns, hooding, blindfolding, guard-instructed or permitted beatings by fellow prisoners, use of handcuffs or ankle fetters for extended periods, including in solitary confinement or secure holding areas, submersion in pits of water or sewage, exposure to conditions of extreme heat or cold, being forced to maintain uncomfortable positions such as sitting, squatting, lying down, or standing for long periods of time, sometimes with objects held under arms, deprivation of sleep, food, or water, prolonged solitary confinement, denial of medical treatment and medication, hard labor, suspension from overhead fixtures with handcuffs. Oh my goodness.
Jesus. Ouch.
Horrible physical torture. 3,006 people had died either from stress caused by constant harassment, mistreatment, torture in detention facilities, which resulted in them dying on being released, or died while being tortured in the detention facilities. So they could torture the heck out of you and let you go, and then you die. And the Chinese government can say, well, we didn't kill him. But you died as a result of essentially your injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, and the psychological torment.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Perhaps the most extreme allegations against the Chinese state involves the harvesting of organs from detained Falun Gong members.
While they were still alive?
Yes. Claims suggest that organs were taken from patients while they were alive and then used for organ transplants. This is what I saw in D.C. I saw Falun Gong members essentially telling this story. Those who died as a result of these operations were never shown to their families and often quickly cremated to hide any evidence of wrongdoing. Since China prosecutes whistleblowers on human rights abuses and does not allow organizations like the Red Cross access to prisoners, these stories are very difficult to corroborate. So Falun Gong tells these tales, but in fairness and all honesty, we have a very hard time determining whether it happened, whether it has happened or not. All that having been said, in 2006, Chinese Deputy Health Minister Huang Zhefu acknowledged that prisoners sentenced to death were often used for organ harvesting. That's any prisoners. And some family members who were allowed to retrieve the bodies of loved ones who died in detention centers reported strange scarring and body parts missing on the corpses of their loved ones. While these autopsies might account for this, while autopsies, suppose they did an autopsy. So let's imagine we're the Chinese state and we're trying to say, well, no, we didn't harvest their organs. We just conducted an autopsy. That's why you see stitched up body parts. However, it makes very little sense to autopsy a person who was beaten to death in a detention center. Right?
Yeah.
If my, corrections folks just beat you to death, I don't need to go ask a doctor how you died.
Yeah, because that's the only reason to do an autopsy, right? Is to figure out how somebody died.
And
so,
yet,
that's wild.
You got beaten to death in the prison, and there's weird scarring on your body, and we did an autopsy on you.
Or were they like trying to find some sort of other reason to put the blame on why they died, so they don't look bad for beating them?
That's possible, yeah. But it seems like they may have harvested their organs. Yeah. Officials and doctors have also admitted to providing or receiving organs from Falun Gong prisoners. So that's the third, piece of evidence that seems to support this idea. All right, so we've covered the conversation about Falun Gong and China, which certainly puts Falun Gong in the position of a sympathetic victim. Yeah? Yes,
I would argue yes.
Now I need to change the conversation a bit because Falun Gong has been in America for quite a while. And Falun Gong has taken a place on the world stage. We can't forget that Falun Gong claims to have millions of adherents. So it has some power, some punch to it.
Yeah, one especially with the stories, like those pretty horrific stories too, that gains a lot of traction, even for people who don't believe in it, like me. I'm like, oh God, I didn't know what those people went through.
So I want to talk about the two ways now that Falun Gong has inserted itself into Western culture.
Okay.
Right? The first one is a newspaper. So I got to say that the story of Falun Gong takes a strange turn here, although, I think it's a somewhat predictable turn. In its loosely affiliated paper, the Epoch Times. Maybe you've seen the Epoch Times circulating on, Facebook or Twitter or whatever. People reposting these articles. It's sort of a big deal, I guess, on the internet. Not the biggest of deals, but it is a deal. To be clear, the newspaper denies any affiliation to Falun Gong, although there are a number of ties to Falun Gong, including the fact that the newspaper features prominent advertisements for Falun Gong's international performance group, Shen Yun.
Wait, Falun Gong owns Shen Yun?
Okay, so yes, we're not going to put a pin in that, but yes, I know you and I now only want to talk about Shen Yun, but...
I've always wanted to see that.
Well... You may not feel that way when we're done.
Oh, no.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I don't want to scare anyone away from Shen Yun. Anyway, let's get back to the Epoch Times. So, newspaper, big internet presence. The paper had been created, at least in part, to oppose Chinese Communist Party ideology and Chinese human rights abuses, including those perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party against Falun Gong. We just did that whole thing about the organs. So, this, again, makes it feel a little bit like this is an organ. Oh, boy. That's a misuse of a word, I guess. It's not a misuse, but it's an extension of Falun Gong. In 2016, because it's very interested in the Falun Gong atrocities.
Yeah.
Right? And they struggle, I think, to get adequate press coverage. But here...
Well, because it's constantly trying to be hidden, too. So.
Right. But here the Epoch Times is all over the thing. So in 2016, the paper's anti-communism led it to take an increasingly far-right stance.
Oh, no.
I mean, think about it. The communists are identified with the left, right? At its worst, the left is accused of communist ideology. So the Epoch Times is going to drift right. So it supported the presidency of Donald Trump in the United States and also Marine Le Pen in France. Those of you who are not familiar with French politics, the Le Pens are a prominent far-rightist group going back generations. They also supported far-rightists in Germany. Building on a... Was it?
I said, oh, God.
Yeah. Building on a culture of conspiracy theorizing developed around Falun Gong's arch enemy, Jiang Zemin, they promoted belief in QAnon-style Clinton-Obama conspiracy theory in the U.S. to bring down Donald Trump. So the Epoch Times is saying that, the liberals are, trying to scheme behind Trump's back.
Oh.
During the presidency.
Oh, so they weren't saying stuff about Trump. They weren't trying to bring down Trump. They were saying people are trying to bring down Trump. Okay.
Very QE. So I want to say one more time that there isn't an official connection between Falun Gong and the Epoch Times, but there's also a logic to the paper's ideology and Falun Gong's history. Trump was very anti-China, had a strong anti-Chinese Communist Party stance, sparred with them over trade, sparred with them over COVID, blamed them for COVID. This certainly would endear him to a movement violently persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Mm-hmm. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that, because Q and QAnon's millenarian belief that Donald Trump would be an agent of an apocalyptic storm also jives a whole lot with Falun Gong's belief that the end of the world is coming. In fact, that it's near. So, you see, they're both touting a millenarian message that we're at the end of days. So at the very least, these seem like Falun Gong and QAnon seems like they should at least get together and talk out their similarities. I mean, they shouldn't. Yeah, we don't want to imagine that conversation, but it feels like a thing that's happening. The Epoch Times has become an increasingly radioactive presence on the internet, and it had its advertising banned from both Facebook and YouTube in 2019. So, our tech overlords got a little annoyed with the Falun Gongs, violated the policies.
We got them.
Yeah. I mean, not Falun Gong, Epoch Times. Right. Okay. So...
Why do they always, so they want Donald Trump to usher, not Falun Gong, but QAnon wants Trump to usher in an apocalypse?
Yeah, did you not do my Q episode of somebody else doing Q?
I don't remember.
Yeah, the storm. It's called The Storm. I mean, it's a little late now for the storm. We missed the storm, but yeah, he was supposed to...
Oh, I did know about that.
Clean out the government.
Oh, so it was an apocalypse for all the people that they don't like.
Yeah,
they were fine.
Put the Bidens in jail and the Obamas and the Clintons and
Okay.
Then
so
paradise would reign on Earth. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I thought they meant that they just wanted him to destroy the world, and I'm like, that seems appropriate for what he was doing, but...
Falun Gong, yes, does have a different picture, I guess, of the end times, so I don't know. Maybe their attitude toward Donald Trump is not as confusing as we think, but okay, so... Shen Yun.
No, yes, I almost forgot.
Let's spare a few words at the end of the episode here for Shen Yun, whose posters with that leaping Chinese dancer... you've very likely seen if you've spent regular time in a major city in the United States. Or as Savannah spends much time at performance venues, you may have seen Shen Yun coming to those venues.
Yeah.
So
I've seen videos, at the Hippodrome, sometimes they'll play videos and stuff like that, and it's always a bunch of white people being like, wow, this was amazing, and then it shows a clip of them spinning, and then it's like, it's beautiful. The videos are very weird.
There's a lot of acrobatics. And
yeah, I mean, it looks fascinating. I mean, the way that people can move like that, but...
Classic Chinese performance style Beijing opera kind of things. I mean, they're incorporated into Beijing opera. They're not singing Beijing opera at you, I don't think. But
It didn't seem like it from the promotional videos that I've seen.
There are elements of Chinese performance culture, particularly the acrobatics, and they like to work with fabrics and stuff that Western audiences just eat right up. But then when they start to sing, no, we're not generally into that. So anyhow, Shen Yun has a much more obvious tie to Falun Gong because Shen Yun's operations are actually based on Falun Gong's compound in Deer Park, New York. So Falun Gong, Li has a compound in Deer Park, and that's where Shen Yun rehearses.
That's crazy. Yeah. What?
Falun Gong headquarters is also Shen Yun headquarters. They are the same place.
That makes me a little worried. The word compound also is like not a great word to use. And then the fact that like they seem so brainwashed because they all have to have the exact same movements at the exact same time. It feels kind of strange.
Well, I have to be honest with you. Should we garner enough patrons, I will most definitely establish a compound.
Oh, yeah. We've already talked about that.
Goes without saying. But
we
yes.
We were like, we could use my grandparents' backyard. It's pretty big. The compound. They'd probably be cool with it.
Yeah. Anyhow, but yeah. So we're not talking about like, you know, Shen Yun is rehearsing in the next door to Falun Gong. They just happen to both be in Deer Park, New York.
No,
they are literally on the same ground.
Whoa.
So. It is also the case that Shen Yun performances are booked and promoted by Shen Yun itself. Now, this is a little bit of nerdy theater talk, but often, you know, if you're like a touring musician or something, you'll be booked into a space, and part of the arrangement is that the space will market your show. But Shen Yun is like its own thing. It rents out the theater, and then it markets itself.
Weird.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
I mean, it's not totally unusual in the theater world. If you have a popular act, you might do that. You might rent a theater, and I've rented theaters in the past to do different kinds of shows, but they basically are handling their own operation, even though they're at these large venues. So it's a big dollar amount that they're putting out.
And they put up a ton of billboards.
They do.
There's still one when I drive to Essex to visit my friend Maddie. I see one every time, and it's like, and it was like coming 2019 because it was right before COVID.
Still coming.
Yep.
Well, you know, maybe time will start going backwards after the apocalypse, and then they'll be back.
There we go, and I can go see it.
So, Falun Gong organizations, local Falun Gong organizations. So there's the headquarters in Deer Park, but there's local Falun Gong organizations all around the Western world. The local chapter is generally who supports and pays for all that marketing that you see when Shen Yun comes to town.
Oh my God.
And Li has been, he's reticent. He doesn't speak specifically on Epoch Times, but when it comes to Shen Yun, he has talked about Shen Yun performances, telling his followers to help bring out the crowds for the Shen Yun shows, and also to downplay Shen Yun's connection to Falun Gong.
Whoa.
Because I think he understands that the intricacies of Falun Gong belief may make Shen Yun less appealing to a broad Western audience. But they believe that the Shen Yun performances are elevating us spiritually. So they don't want to turn us off.
Oh, they believe that it's making us, like,
it's good for us.
Non-believers more enlightened.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Does it, I've never seen it, obviously. To me, it seems like it was just, like, dancing and acrobatics, but like do they talk about Falun Gong and stuff?
I'm going to get there.
Oh my God.
It is a lot of that, though. It is a lot of good. They are actively opposed also by Chinese diplomats. So when Shen Yun comes to town, the Chinese embassy in London or Washington, D.C. is going to kick out a little diplomat who's going to run down the street to that theater, knock on the door and say, we really would prefer that you not host Shen Yun here.
Whoa. Yep. What in the world? This is crazy.
So the goal of Shen Yun, getting to the content, is to perform a version of Chinese culture that predates communism. So their view is that communism has corrupted Chinese culture. So they want to give you classic Chinese culture, classic scenes from traditional Chinese epics like Journey to the West, which is where we know the Monkey King from. Mm-hmm. For example, Shen Yun performs scenes also, however, in addition to this traditional Chinese fair, about the persecution of Falun Gong members in China.
Oh,
yes.
wow.
So you'll be watching the Monkey King and having a grand old time, and there's acrobatics and all
eating
that.
the peaches and stuff.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, he's eating them immortal peaches. And then all of a sudden, in comes these Chinese communist characters to persecute some Falun Gong people. Yeah.
Ooh.
Shen Yun has actually been criticized for promoting less than subtle messages opposing atheism, the theory of evolution, homosexuality, and, remember from the earlier part of the episode here, promoting segregation in sexual reproduction. Remember that little bit of racism in Li's ideology, that Chinese have sex with Chinese.
That is so strange.
Whites with whites, on and on. Yeah.
I genuinely thought that it was just like a dance thing, like dance acrobatics thing. I had no idea. That is crazy.
Some people, it is true that people will go to the Shen Yun show and they'll be like, yes, I was so enlightened by Chinese culture. But some people walk out annoyed that they were just pitched this cult.
Oh, that would have been me. I would have been pissed if I left that.
From my understanding, though, from my research, I discovered that Falun Gong, there's a couple of different takes on this. Some commentators believe that different Shen Yun troops just have different ways of performing and different ideologies. However, others think that like a Shen Yun performance in Dallas, Texas, or San Antonio or Houston is going to be very different from a Falun Gong performance in Toronto.
Well, because they could be more racist in Texas, can't they?
In theory, yeah.
And is that what they're getting at?
There may be, so the homosexual, it's very subtle. You'll just see like the enemies of, the future, or the enemies of the good people. There just happen to be two guys holding hands among them.
Oh my God.
Okay,
that's
so you don't think that's subtle, but
that's not subtle at all.
It's not like,
you have like two bad guys come in who are like, we're going to destroy the world, and then they give each other a little kiss first, and then they go and destroy the world. Like, that's not subtle at all.
It's a little bit more like 15 bad guys come in, and two of them just so happen to be, chicks making out.
Okay. I guess that's slightly more subtle, but it's still really strange.
Others are, I don't know, holding Darwin's theory of evolution, and others are I don't even know. I don't know how they get to all these things, but it's sort of like you could miss it, I guess, if you're not paying close attention. There.
I kind of want to see it now, but we can't pay for it. We got to like sneak in somehow.
Get some Shen Yun. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe they'll hear this episode and decide that we were friendly enough to Falun Gong that we deserve.
Not after this.
Well, I want to give the full picture. I mean, the recent history with the Epoch Times and Shen Yun complicates our understanding of Falun Gong, but in my opinion, it should not discount the suffering that these people have endured.
Yes.
Or, as we've mentioned, the bravery they've exhibited in their home country. We may not agree with everything they believe, but I hope we can all agree on their right to believe as they choose, without government interference, and to fool us into going to Shen Yun performances if they can do it. Like
they almost got me, those bastards.
Yeah, if you don't do your research in advance, then you get what you get. Yeah.
That is wild.
Our sources today include Maria Hsia Shang's Falun Gong, The End of Days, Bloody Harvest, revised report into allegations of organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners in China by David Matas. Those are the ones I want to highlight anyway. If you're interested in this topic, go ahead and check those out. All right, bring us on home. Who wants to bring us home? It's always a tense moment.
I hereby adjourn and declare close this meeting of alchemical actors until such a time as we get together and do it again.
You want to provide support there, Shen?
Woo! Thank you.
All right, so no voice actors today, but I do want to thank Shannon Landers, our Inquisitor.
Bye, guys. I'm like doing tiny little golf claps. I don't know why. Felt appropriate.
For them. For folks who listen.
Listeners at home and my parallel self. Good job.
And our live studio audience.
Yeah! It's Savannah Ferret's sister, the 84th degree.
Goodbye. Be kind to each other.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Dr. Robert C. Thompson, coming to you next time with the story of Malcolm X. And, the Nation of Islam. So a little bit more danger, a little bit more violence. But, it's important to get to the heart of these matters here on Occult Confessions.